He doesn't dodge. He doesn't block. He just stands there and lets the attack land. Full force, point blank, right to the chest, and nothing happens. The Awakener stares. His hand is shaking. He just threw everything he had at this man. His most powerful skill, the one that caved in a dungeon wall last week. And this barbarian didn't even flinch. Didn't even blink. Just lit down at the impact point like he was checking if his shirt got wrinkled. That's the moment everyone in the arena goes silent. Because that should not be possible. Let me back up, because to understand why that scene breaks everyone's brain, you need to understand what this world is, who this man is, and exactly how insane the gap between him and everyone else really is. The world changed. Of course it did. It always does in these stories. One day the sky cracked open, dungeons started appearing across the globe, and people started awakening abilities. Magic, skills, classes, the whole deal. Suddenly, humanity had to figure out how to fight monsters, clear dungeons, and build a new society around people who could throw fireballs and survive getting stabbed. Most Awakeners get decent classes: warrior, mage, healer, archer. Some get rare ones, and a small few, the elites, get legendary classes that make them walking disasters. Our guy, he gets barbarian. Now, before you think that sounds cool, understand something. In this world, barbarian is considered one of the worst classes an Awakener can receive. It's loud, it's primitive, it's looked down on. No magic, no finesse, no complicated skill trees, or elemental affinity, just raw physical stats and the ability to take hits. The Awakener community has rankings for this kind of thing, and Barbarian sits near the bottom of the prestige list. His name is Kang Minho, and from the moment his class is revealed, everyone around him treats him like a mistake. His guild writes him off immediately. He gets assigned to the lowest tier dungeon runs. Support duties. Carrying gear, standing at the back while real Awakeners do the actual work. He doesn't complain. Not yet. He just keeps showing up, keeps training, keeps doing whatever he's told. The guy is built like a wall and he's being used as furniture. The other guild members don't even bother learning his name properly. They call him the mule. The guy who hauls the equipment, the guy who stands in the corner and looks intimidating but contributes nothing. One of the senior members, a fire mage named Jihoon, makes it a habit of reminding Minho exactly where he stands. Every mission briefing, every post-dungeon debrief. Every single time Minho so much as opens his mouth to ask a question. Stick to carrying boxes, barbarian. Leave the fighting to people with real classes. Minho doesn't react, he takes it. Every time. And everyone around him assumes that means he agrees. Big mistake. Here's what nobody in that guild understands yet. The Barbarian class doesn't give you skills the same way other classes do. Other Awakeners unlock abilities from a list. A mage gets Fireball, then Flame Burst, then Inferno Wave. Progression is linear, predictable, visible. You can look at someone's class screen and know exactly what they can do. Barbarians don't work like that. The Barbarian class grows through something called endurance accumulation. Every hit Minho takes, every attack that lands on him, every impact he absorbs gets stored. Not as damage, as strength, as defense, as fortitude. The system treats pain like currency for a barbarian, and Minho has been collecting it silently since the moment he awakened. His guild members don't know this. They never looked into it. Why would they? He's the mule. He carries boxes. What they don't realize is that every time they dragged him into a dungeon, even as support, he was getting hit by monsters on the perimeter, getting clipped by stray AoE damage from his own teammates, getting slapped around by dungeon mechanics because he was always the one who walked point into an untested corridor, so the real Awakeners didn't have to risk it. Every single one of those hits fed the system. And Minho, he never told anyone how fast his stats were climbing. The first real crack appears on a B-rank dungeon run. The guild takes it expecting a standard clear. 3 mages, 2 swordsmen, 1 healer, and Minho in the back, doing whatever a mule does. They hit the boss room and the dungeon mutates, a rare event where the monster exceeds its registered rank. The boss isn't B rank anymore. It's A rank, minimum. Maybe higher. The two swordsmen get blown back in the first exchange. One of the mages tries to contain it and gets tossed into a wall hard enough to crack his armor. Jihoon, the fire mage who loves talking, fires off his best spell and the boss barely notices. The healer is screaming. The guild is falling apart in real time. And then Minho walks forward. Nobody tells him to. Nobody asks. He just steps out of the corner where he was standing and puts himself directly in front of the boss. The boss hits him hard. Minho slides back 3 feet. His boots leave scrape marks on the dungeon floor. He looks down at his chest, then back up at the boss. Then he smiles. The guild members who are still conscious freeze when they see that smile, because it's not a nervous smile. It's not a "this is fine" smile. It's the smile of someone who just got exactly what they wanted. The barbarian charges. What happens next is not pretty. It's not graceful. It's not some elegant display of combat technique. Minho just crashes into the boss like a boulder falling off a cliff, grabs it, and does not let go. Every counterattack the boss throws lands. Every slam, every claw, every spike of energy, it hits Minho clean. And each time it does, Minho gets slightly harder to move. Slightly harder to stop. The endurance accumulation is triggering in real time, stacking with every exchange, and the boss is essentially giving Minho a full power-up for free. By the time Minho finally drops the boss, he's taken enough damage to kill a normal A-rank awakener 3 times over. He's barely breathing hard. The guild stands there in complete silence. Jihoon stares at the boss's corpse, then at Minho, then at the battle log on his status display. The damage numbers. The hit count. He runs the math. He can't make it add up. A barbarian should not have survived that. A barbarian should not have kept fighting through that. A barbarian definitely should not be standing there looking like he just went for a light jog. How? Jihoon says. Just that one word. Minho picks up a piece of broken dungeon wall and throws it over his shoulder, cleaning off his hand. I've been getting hit a lot, he says. Turns out, that was the point. Nobody laughs. Nobody knows how to respond. The guildmaster calls for an emergency debrief back at headquarters, and Minho goes back to carrying boxes because honestly, what else is he gonna do? But the information is out there now. Someone saw. Someone always sees. The guild gets an unexpected visitor 3 days later, a man named Director Park. One of their ranking officials from the Korean Awakener Association shows up and asks very specific questions about the B-Rank's dungeon incident, not about the mutation, about the barbarian who soloed a mutated boss without a scratch. The guildmaster tries to minimize it. Minho just got lucky. The boss was weakened. It was a team effort, technically. Director Park nods politely and then leaves. An hour later, Minho gets a personal message on his Awakener device. Not from the guild, from the association itself. Subject line: Private testing invitation. He almost deletes it. He's suspicious. He's been in this guild long enough to learn that when powerful people suddenly get interested in you, it's usually not because they want to help, but something makes him open it. Curiosity, maybe. Or just the tired feeling of a man who has spent years being dismissed and wonders if this might finally be something different. The message is short. 6 sentences. One of them says, "We believe your class may have been misclassified at the lower end of its potential spectrum." Misclassified. That's a word that hits different when you spent 2 years being called a mule. He shows up. The testing facility is not what he expected. It's not some government lab with nervous technicians. It's a controlled combat environment underground, the kind used for high-tier awakener evaluation. Long corridors, reinforced walls, observation windows with people behind them. Lots of people, actually, which Minho notices immediately. Director Park greets him personally, explains that they want to run a standard battery of impact assessments. Standard language, clinical tone, like they're going to weigh him and check his blood pressure. What they actually do is bring in 9 different awakeners, B ranks, A rank, and 2 S rank, and tell them to hit Minho as hard as they want. Minho blinks at this. All at once? He asks. In sequence, Director Park says. We'll stop if you ask us to. Minho looks at the 9 awakeners. They look back at him. A couple of them look uncomfortable. The S-ranks look mildly offended at the assignment. One of them, a woman with silver-streaked hair and an expression like she stepped in something unpleasant, crosses her arms and says, "I don't hit civilians." "He's not a civilian," Director Park says. "He's the subject. Please proceed." They start with the B ranks. A swordsman goes first, full force strike, mid-level combat skill activated. It lands. Minho doesn't move. The swordsman tries again. Faster this time, different angle. Same result. The mage goes next. Spell impact. Fire type. The kind that leaves scorch marks on reinforced concrete. Hits Minho square in the chest. Minho looks down. His shirt is singed. He says. The air ranks go. One after another. Skills activating, full power. The observation room behind the glass is tracking every metric. Minho absorbs each one. Some of them push him back a step. One of them makes him grunt. A particularly nasty thunder-type skill from an A-rank specialist actually makes him stumble, and everyone in the room leans forward. But then Minho straightens up, rolls his shoulder and says, "Okay, that one was good." Then the S-rank step forward. The silver-haired woman has apparently decided she's over her ethical objection. She activates something. Her skill doesn't have a visible flash or explosion. It's just a pressure, like the air itself compresses around her fist, and she hits Minho in the chest with a technique that, according to the readout, would have cracked a dungeon-grade titanium barrier in half. Minho takes a half step back. He looks at her. She looks at him. "Do that again," he says. She does. 3 more times. Each one harder. And with each hit, the monitoring system in the room starts screaming alerts because Minho's defense stat is climbing. Real time. Live. Every impact is feeding the accumulation, and the numbers are jumping in ways the system clearly was not designed to track. By the 4th hit from the S ranks, she's the one pulling back, not because she's tired, because her fist hurts. The room behind the glass has gone completely silent. Director Park is staring at a data screen with an expression like he's watching someone rewrite physics. He pulls up Minho's class profile. He pulls up the Barbarian class documentation, the official one, the one that was written when barbarians were considered low tier. He reads the endurance accumulation mechanic. He reads the theoretical cap values. He looks at what Minho's stats are registering at right now, after being hit by 2 S ranks. He puts the tablet down. "We need to talk," he says to the room, to nobody in particular, about what a barbarian's actual ceiling is. Here's where it gets truly insane. The Barbarian class documentation, the old version that everyone used to justify calling it a trash class, was written based on the assumption that barbarians would accumulate damage from monster attacks in dungeons. That was the intended growth path. Slow, grinding, dungeon by dungeon. Nobody modeled what happens when you start feeding a barbarian hits from awakeners, especially high-ranked ones, because awakener attacks carry something monster attacks don't. System energy, the dense compressed power that comes from a human who has integrated the awakening system into their body. When that energy hits Minho, his accumulation doesn't just stack his defense. It absorbs a fraction of the system energy and integrates it, which means every time an S-rank hits him, he's passively absorbing a trace amount of S-rank power. He has been, quietly, this entire time, the silver-haired woman. Her name is Choi Sura, S-rank Awakener, currently ranked 3rd in the country. Hears this explanation and stares at Minho with an expression that has moved past offense and into something closer to alarm. "How long has he been awakened?" she asks. 2 years, Director Park says. She does the math. So does everyone else in the room. 2 years. Dungeons, guild missions, sparring sessions where his own teammates accidentally clipped him. 2 years of accumulation that nobody tracked because nobody thought barbarians were worth tracking. "What's his current effective defense tier?" Sarah asks. Director Park hesitates. "We're still calculating, but preliminary estimate puts his raw durability comparable to a high A rank at minimum. With scaling potentially what?" She presses. He closes the tablet, potentially past anything we formally categorized. And that's when the guildmaster, who was notified of the testing and decided to show up in person to make sure the association wasn't going to steal his mule, turns absolutely white. Because he understands what this means. He understands that, for 2 years he had an anomaly, a walking statistical impossibility, carrying gear for his guild, getting hit by friendly fire, getting used as a shield during dungeon runs without anyone realizing the shield was becoming permanently stronger every single time. He built Minho's defense for him. His entire guild did, without meaning to. Every careless A-rank swing that clipped Minho, every dungeon boss that swatted him aside while the real fighters did their thing. The guildmaster looks at Minho. Minho looks back at him. So, the guildmaster says carefully, about your compensation structure. I quit, Minho says, just like that. No drama. No long speech. No revenge monologue. He just says it, flat and clean, and walks out of the evaluation room. Sierra watches him leave. Then she turns to Director Park. Are we going to offer him something? I already drafted the contract, Director Park says. I've been drafting it since the 3rd hit. Minho joins the association as an independent contractor. No guild. No chain of command. No more boxes to carry. He gets assigned to high-risk dungeon requests, specifically the ones that other guilds have failed to clear because the boss was too durable, too aggressive, or too defensive for standard damage-dealing builds to crack, which is funny in a dark way. For 2 years, Minho was useless because he couldn't deal damage. Now he's being deployed precisely because his role isn't to deal damage. It's to be undamageable, while the dungeon does all the work of making him stronger. He goes into a dungeon. He lets the boss hit him. The boss gets tired. Minho doesn't. Eventually, Minho wins. It's not elegant. The first 2 clears he does solo take hours, but he clears them. Dungeons that S-rank parties failed to crack in under 40 minutes get cleared by this one man who just absolutely refuses to die, and the dungeon community starts talking. Who is the barbarian? What guild is he from? What's his actual rank? The association doesn't release his stats. They know what they have. They're not handing the competition a roadmap. His former guild, the one where Jehoon loved calling him a mule, starts making public statements. Vague ones. About how they recognized his potential early, about how they invested in his development, about what a strong foundation their training provided him. Nobody who was actually there believes this. Everybody who's hearing it for the first time does. Minho sees one of these statements online, and his reaction is one single text to Director Park. Can I sue them for that? Director Park's response. Technically, yes, but let's wait until you're more publicly visible. The optics will be better. That's the moment Minho realizes his career just became political. Great. Just great. The dungeon where everything goes sideways, where the story stops being about quiet growth and becomes something louder, is a special designated S-rank gate in the Eastern District. Red Zone classification. 3 separate guilds attempted entry over 2 weeks. 2 of them lost members. The 3rd one made it to the middle floors and retreated when their healer started hemorrhaging mana from the dungeon's passive suppression field. The association wants it cleared. The monster inside, unofficial name among dungeon analysts is the immovable tyrant, is categorized as a siege-type boss. Enormous, durable, nearly immune to standard combat damage, which is why the clearance proposal ends up on Minho's desk. He reads it. He reads it again. This thing is immune to physical damage, he says. Largely, says the analyst who briefed him. Its shell absorbs conventional impact. Energy attacks deal more, but the suppression field in there neuters anyone with high system energy before they get close enough. Minho stares at the dungeon schematic. So it hits hard, but it can't be damaged by normal fighters. Correct. And the suppression field cuts down energy users. Correct. He leans back. So what they need is someone who doesn't rely on energy attacks, can take hits from something enormous, and get stronger the more it hurts them. The analyst looks at him. Yes. Great, Minho says. That's extremely not dangerous. Let's go. 3 guilds watch his entry from the monitoring station set up outside the gate. This includes Jehoon's guild, the one Minho used to haul gear for, which is there because their guildmaster is trying to position them as the second-string operation that backs up the association if the barbarian fails. Ji-hoon himself is standing at the observation monitors with his arms crossed, wearing an expression that he probably thinks looks analytical, but mostly reads as bitter. He'll make it to the 3rd floor, Ji-hoon says. Max, then the suppression field will lock up his muscles and he'll retreat. Barbarians aren't energy-based, someone next to him says. Suppression field might not affect him. Ji-hoon sniffs. He's still just a barbarian. This dungeon killed air ranks. Inside the dungeon, Minho is making notes. The first 3 floors are infested with high-tier monsters, dense concentrations of heavy hitters that would overwhelm a standard party through sheer force and volume. For Minho, this is essentially a free stat boost waiting to happen. He doesn't rush. He walks slowly, lets the monsters come to him in groups, absorbs the hits, and accumulates. He's been doing this for months now. He has a system. He knows exactly how to position himself so the impacts land on his highest defense zones, how to read monster attack patterns, how to let the dungeon teach him without getting actually overwhelmed. The suppression field is real. He feels it as a kind of heaviness in the air as he descends. But the analyst was right. It targets system energy. Minho's endurance accumulation works differently. It's more like a passive metabolic function than an active skill. The suppression field barely registers it. By the time he reaches the boss room, 4-7, which none of the previous parties ever reached, Minho's defense has been climbing steadily for hours. He's been awake since 4 in the morning. He ate 3 protein bars at the dungeon entrance and forgot to bring water. He's mildly annoyed about the water thing. The immovable tyrant is exactly what the name suggests. A creature the size of a small building, coated in overlapping layers of calcified shell, moving on 6 limbs with a sound like a landslide. It has no visible eyes. It finds Minho by vibration. When it turns toward him, the entire floor shakes with the shift in weight. Minho looks up at it. Okay, he says to himself. Let's see what you've got. The tyrant hits him with a limb the size of a tree trunk. Minho goes through a wall. Not metaphorically. Literally through the dungeon wall. The impact punches him clean through stone, reinforced by dungeon-grade density, and he skids across the next chamber before stopping. He lies there for a second. The monitoring station outside registers the impact, and the readout numbers make 2 of the analysts go quiet. Then Minho gets up. He shakes debris off his shoulders and walks back through the hole he made in the wall. The tyrant swings again. Minho catches the limb. Not with a skill. Not with a special technique. Just grabs it. Both hands. He digs his heels in and the floor cracks under him, and he does not let go. The accumulation is running full speed now. Every second of contact with this creature is feeding his stats. The tyrant is essentially the perfect opponent for a barbarian, massive, powerful, physically dominant, and it has no idea it's losing the moment it makes contact. Back at the monitoring station, the readout is going wild. Ji-hoon is no longer making predictions. He's staring at the screens with an expression that has lost all its posturing and settled into something closer to disbelief. His guildmaster's next to him, equally silent, watching a man who used to carry their bag stand inside a room with a dungeon boss 3 times his size and not only survive but hold the thing in place. His defense stat, the analyst announces, tracking the live feed. It's still going up. How? Someone says. Every hit it lands, it's charging him. Real-time accumulation. A long pause. So the harder it hits him, Ji-hoon says slowly, the stronger his defense gets. Yes. And if it stops hitting him, he stops accumulating. Technically, yes. But he's been in there long enough that his baseline is already. The analyst checks the numbers and stops talking for a second. His current baseline defense is registering above S-rank standard. Dead silence at the monitoring station. Ji-hoon quietly sits down. Inside the dungeon, the fight has reached the stage where the tyrant has realized hitting Minho isn't doing what hitting things usually does. So it tries something different. It wraps one of its limbs around him and squeezes. Minho grins. Contact. Extended, sustained, high-pressure contact. This is better than getting punched. This is like an extended loading sequence. His stat accumulation spikes hard. and the tyrant's crushing grip, which would have liquefied a standard S-rank awakener, does nothing except make the numbers on Minho's defense screen climb faster. You picked the wrong guy, Minho says to nobody, because he's alone in here and talking to a monster that has no concept of irony. He gets both hands around the limb that's squeezing him, finds the natural gap in the shell armor, and starts pushing. Slowly, steadily, not fast. Barbarians aren't known for attack power, but with the pressure that just doesn't stop. The tyrant tries to resist. It's strong. For a few seconds, it manages to hold, but Minho's grip is fed by 2 years of accumulated hits, and whatever he lacks in natural attack power, his passive stats have long since caught up. The limb breaks. The tyrant makes a sound, a deep resonant crack like something structural failing, and it rears back. For the first time since the dungeon was discovered, the immovable tyrant moves backward. Minho follows it. The rest of the fight is ugly and long and involves Minho getting thrown through 2 more walls, swallowed briefly by a dungeon terrain collapse, and at one point finding himself underneath the tyrant with 7 tons of monster standing on him. He stays down there for 40 seconds before pushing himself back to the surface through the dungeon floor, at which point the tyrant, understandably, seems confused. When it finally ends, when the tyrant collapses and the dungeon begins its post-clear sequence, Minho is covered in dust, missing 1 boot, and has a section of shell armor from the tyrant stuck in his shoulder that he has to pull out himself because there's nobody else in here. He holds the shell fragment up and looks at it. Souvenir, he decides. The monitoring station erupts when the dungeon shows a clear status. Cheering for most people. Complete silence from Jihoon's corner. Director Park is already on his communication device, relaying the clear to the association's central office with a tone that does a poor job of hiding how pleased he is. Minho walks out of the gate carrying the shell fragment and looking like he went for a rough hike. His status display is screaming alerts about new stat thresholds reached. A system notification that he's never seen before pops up on his screen. Endurance Accumulation, milestone reached. New passive unlocked, absolute body. He reads the description, stops walking, reads it again. Absolute body. All external damage to the user is reduced to 0 while this passive is active. Duration scales with current accumulation total. Activation threshold achieved. He stares at this for a long moment. So now I literally can't be damaged, he says out loud. Director Park, who has just caught up to him at the gate exit, hears this and immediately reads the screen over his shoulder. There is a 3-second pause, during which the only sound is the wind. I'm going to need you to understand, Director Park says carefully, that this information cannot leave this immediate circle until we figure out the legal and strategic implications of what you just described. Someone's going to have to explain to me what the strategic implications of being invincible are, Minho says. Please don't use that word where anyone can hear you. The shell fragment becomes something of an unofficial symbol in the weeks that follow. The dungeon community is obsessed with the clear. The fact that a solo barbarian cleared a dungeon that destroyed multiple full S-rank parties is the kind of thing that breaks the ranking logic the Awakener world runs on. The association releases a carefully worded statement confirming the clear, confirming Minho's role, and saying absolutely nothing specific about his stats. The internet fills in the blanks with guesses. Most of them are wrong. Some of them are close enough to make the association nervous. One account, a dungeon analyst with a large following, runs the numbers based on the publicly known information about barbarian accumulation mechanics and arrives at a defense estimate that makes Director Park send an official cease and desist, which naturally just makes more people look at the estimate. Jihoon's guild releases another statement. This one is noticeably less warm about Minho than the previous ones. The tone has shifted from, "We trained him," to "We always knew barbarians were an underrated class," which is doing a lot of work considering Jihoon once told Minho to his face that barbarians were dead weight. Minho reads the statement, screenshots it, and sends it to Director Park with the note. Is it too early to sue them now? Director Park, still waiting on the PR window. Soon. What nobody outside the association inner circle knows yet is that the absolute body passive is not the end of Minho's growth. It's the beginning of the next phase. The dungeon analyst who ran those estimates, He wasn't wrong about Minho's current defense. He was wrong about where the ceiling is, because there isn't one. This is the part of the Barbarian class documentation that literally nobody read because they stopped reading at trash class. The accumulation mechanics don't cap at S-rank equivalency. They don't cap at anything explicitly stated. The system documentation for barbarians is ambiguous on the upper limit of endurance accumulation, in a way that the class designers clearly never expected to matter because they assumed barbarians would slowly grind through C and B rank dungeons for years before reaching anything significant. They did not account for Minho. They did not account for 2 years of guild missions in high-tier dungeons absorbing Awakener-grade hits, or what happens when you feed an S-rank monster's sustained physical pressure to a man whose entire class is built to convert incoming damage into permanent stats. Director Park brings in a class mechanics specialist from the association's research division. Her name is Dr. Han, and she is the kind of person who has clearly never talked to an athlete in her life, but knows everything about how the system classifies physical capability. She reviews Minho's complete stat history, runs a projection model based on the accumulation rate from the tyrant fight, and presents her findings in a meeting that also includes Sarah and 2 other S-rank awakeners who have been quietly looped in. The projection model shows Minho's defense curve. It goes up, steeply, then steeper. There's no visible plateau in the first 50 years of projected accumulation time. There's a note at the bottom of the projection that says, in the dry language of academic documents, theoretical upper bound, undetermined. Undetermined, Sierra reads. As in, you don't know where it stops. As in, Dr. Han says, based on current data, we cannot prove it does. Long pause. He can literally just keep getting harder to hurt, Sarah says. Indefinitely, Dr. Murcha, and confirms. Minho, who has been sitting in this meeting eating a convenience store sandwich because he was hungry and nobody told him there would be food at this briefing, swallows a bite and says, "Is this the part where someone tells me I have to go fight something even bigger?" "Yes," Director Park says. "Probably. Is it going to be able to hurt me?" "We're hoping not." "Okay," Minho says. "Can I get some water?" "I forgot water in the last dungeon, and I'm still annoyed about that." The new assignment comes 4 days later. Not a dungeon this time, a gate. A much rarer event, where the dungeon doesn't form underground but breaks open on the surface level, directly into populated space. Red zone. Urban, the monster that emerged from it. Only one, but one is enough, has been contained by the association's emergency response team in an industrial district. Which sounds great until you understand that containing it means 12 S-rank awakeners have been rotating shifts around this thing for 6 days, and they're still active, and the ones it's managed to hit are recovering in hospital. It's a siege-type entity. Dungeon-born, no class, just mass and force, and an apparently inexhaustible capacity for physical punishment. It's been designated Gate Monster, category Exceptional. The association hasn't publicly released the designation because that category is reserved for threats that exceed standard S-rank framework. In other words, above S-rank. Unknown ceiling. Possibly never seen before. Minho reads the file and feels something he hasn't felt in years. Not fear. Something more like recognition. Like looking in a mirror. It won't die, he says. Every attack lands, the briefing agent confirms. It just doesn't seem to accumulate damage the way normal monsters do. Huh, Minho says. What? I was just thinking it sounds familiar. He closes the file. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll go. We haven't discussed the risk assessment, something that doesn't take damage from attacks and just gets hit and keeps going, Minho says. I think I know how to handle that. What he means is, you don't beat something like that by trying to damage it. You beat something like that by being more of it than it is. You out-endure it. You take every hit it has, and you return it. Not with attack power. Barbarians still aren't known for that. But with presence. With weight. With the immovable fact of a body that has absorbed more punishment than this creature has ever delivered and is still standing. The strategy, such as it is to walk up to it, let it hit him, and hit it back. Slowly. Steadily, until one of them falls. What if it doesn't fall? The briefing agent asks. Then I'll still be standing, Minho says. Same difference. On the day Minho enters the containment zone, the 12's S-rank awakeners rotating the perimeter see him walking in, and 3 of them immediately try to stop him, not because they think he'll get hurt, because one of them recognizes him. Word has spread about the tyrant clear, and 2 of them have looked up his documented stats and done the very same math that Director Park and Sarah in Dr. Han have done. The one who recognizes him is a tall man named Choi. No relation to Sarah, who fought in 3 different dungeon raids where Minho was present and can therefore confirm from personal experience that this man does not go down. He steps aside. The other 2 follow his lead. Good luck, one of them says. Minho nods. Thanks. Hey, can one of you get me a water bottle? I keep forgetting water. Someone hands him a bottle. He drinks half of it, pockets the rest, and walks into the containment zone. The category exceptional entity notices him immediately. It's large, not tyrant large, but dense, in a way that reads as fundamentally wrong, like matter compressed beyond natural proportion. It turns toward him and the air pressure shifts. Minho finishes his water. It charges. He braces. The impact when it hits him is felt by every awakener at the perimeter. Not heard, felt. A concussive wave that rattles equipment and makes 2 of the monitoring devices momentarily lose signal. The entity hits Minho with its full force, the kind of force that has been cracking building foundations for 6 days in exhausting S-rank rotations just by existing. Minho skids back. 10 feet. 15. His boots carve lines in the concrete. He stops. He looks at his hands, flexes his fingers, looks back at the entity. Then he walks forward again. The entity hits him a second time. This time he only moves 5 feet. Third hit 2 feet. Fourth hit, he doesn't move at all. The impact still lands. He still feels it in some baseline physical way that doesn't translate to damage. The accumulation is running at maximum speed. The absolute body passive is cycling. And every second this continues. The gap between what this entity can do and what Minho can withstand gets wider in one direction. By the time Minho finally starts hitting back, his punch lands on the entity with the full weight of everything that's been hitting him. Not his attack power, the reflected conversion, a tertiary mechanic of the absolute body passive that Dr. Jerome Han identified 2 days ago and immediately flagged as requiring further study, channels a percentage of accumulated impact back into the first offensive contact Minho makes. In simple terms, the entity spent 20 minutes charging him up. That charge went somewhere, and now it comes back. The entity goes down on the 3rd hit. Not the first, not the second. The 3rd one. The Perimeter Awakeners. 12 of them. Multiple fights lost over 6 days, watching this from the edge of the containment zone. See the category exceptional entity collapse on hit 3. The silence that follows is so complete it's almost loud. Minho stands in the middle of the containment zone, slightly dusty. Left boot getting loose again because the strap keeps taking impact damage, and he pulls his water bottle out of his pocket and finds it empty. Every time, he mutters. Choi, the one who recognized him and stepped aside, is the first one to speak. What was that last thing? What was that mechanic? New passive, Minho says, dotted after the tyrant clear. Still figuring out how it works. You hit it 3 times. Yeah. 3 times. Yeah. Well, it hit me about 40 times first, so I think the score is a little lopsided in my favor. But yes. Choi stares at him. At the fallen entity, at the concrete that got kicked up by their exchange, at the monitoring equipment that is now showing readings nobody at the association has ever entered into their classification system. Are you going to keep going up? Choi asks. Like, is there a point where this stops getting stronger? Minho thinks about Dr. Han's projection graph. The one with no visible plateau. The one with the note that said undetermined at the bottom. Unclear, he says honestly. Choi nods slowly. So basically, you're just gonna keep getting harder to hurt, yes. Forever. Probably. Another long silence. That's terrifying, Choi says. Minho shrugs. It's also kind of nice, actually. Choi says, Minho shrugs. It's also kind of nice, actually. Nobody's called me a mule in 6 months. The reports that go to association leadership after the category exceptional clear contain language that has never been used before in official Awakener documentation. Phrases like soft cap not detected and class ceiling undefined per current classification framework. Director Park submits a formal request to the World Awakener Council, the international governing body, to open a new category for assessment. The category he's proposing is for awakeners, whose growth mechanics don't operate on a standard scale. Awakeners who, theoretically, have no upper limit to a specific stat or ability. The council responds in 11 days. They ask for documentation. Director Park sends it. They ask for a live assessment. Director Park confirms availability. They send their own evaluators, 3 of them, the top assessment specialists in the international body, with their own testing equipment and their own protocols. They bring 4 different awakeners of varying rank to hit Minho with a standardized impact battery. The S-rank evaluator hits him first. Full force. Standard test. Minho stands there. The readout shows 0 damage received. The evaluator hits him again, harder. 0 damage. The evaluator looks at the equipment, checks the calibration, looks at Director Park. Is this machine working? Yes. Director Park says. The evaluator looks at Minho. Are you using an active skill right now? Are you using an active skill right now? No, Minho says. The evaluator thinks for a moment. Have you, in any way, activated a defensive technique in preparation for this test? I had some coffee, Minho says. Does that count? The evaluator does not find this funny. The council's formal designation arrives 8 weeks later. Minho is the first awakener in the history of the classification system to receive a class tier, uncharted marking on his official profile, not S rank, not SS rank. A separate category distinct from the numerical ranking entirely, because the ranking system literally cannot contain the growth projection. Yuhun's guild sees the designation when it goes public. The guildmaster makes a quiet phone call to his legal team. The legal team says it's too late to do anything about the 2 years of unpaid stat accumulation that happened while Minho carried boxes. The guildmaster says several words that are not suitable for a professional environment. Minho gets a notification about the legal call from Director Park via a one-line message. Your former guild is panicking. Enjoy the day. Minho is not actually enjoying the day, because the day involves a briefing about what the World Council wants to do now that they have a person who can absorb unlimited damage, and what they want is, predictably, to put that person in situations where absorbing unlimited damage is useful, which is every situation involving a catastrophic threat that conventional awakeners can't contain. There's a list. The list has 7 items on it. Minho looks at the list. He looks at Director Park. Is item 3 a dungeon that's actively expanding into civilian territory? Yes. And item 5 is a gate event with multiple category exceptional entities. Plural? Yes. We think 3. 3, at least. And item 7, Minho stares at the last item. The description is short, but the classification code next to it is one he doesn't recognize. What classification is that? Director Park is quiet for a moment. That's a new one, he says. We created it last week, after your results. Created it for what? Another pause. Longer. For threats, Director Park says carefully, that we're not sure any other awakener could survive contact with. Minho reads the description of item 7. He reads it twice. He puts the file down on the table slowly. So what you're telling me, he says, is that there's something out there that they're not sure even I can handle. Director Park says nothing. And you put it on the list anyway. It's more of a long-term planning item. It has a date next to it, Minho says. The date next to item 7 is 4 months from now. Minho stares at it. He thinks about the tyrant, about the category exceptional entity, about the accumulation curve on Dr. Hand's graph that has no plateau, about the council evaluator asking if he was using an active skill when the answer was no. The answer was this is just what he is now. This is just his baseline, and that baseline is still going up. He thinks about the water bottle he keeps forgetting. He thinks about 2 years of carrying boxes. He thinks about Ji-hoon's expression when the defense numbers came up on the monitoring screen. He closes the file. 4 months, he says. How much stronger am I going to be in 4 months? Director Park looks at Dr. Han's projection graph at the undetermined notation. We don't know, he says honestly. Minho nods. Then let's find out, he says. He stands up. He picks up his bag. He grabs the shell fragment from the tyrant that he's been keeping on the desk as a paperweight because nobody told him not to, and he finds it funny. He turns toward the door. Tell Dr. Han I'm gonna need a bigger test, he says. And someone put water in my bag. Please, I'm begging. He walks out. The list sits on the table. Item 7 at the bottom. A date 4 months away. And somewhere out there, whatever earned that new classification is doing exactly what it does and has absolutely no idea what's coming for it.